Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on Mirror Now. Joining me today on this show is Dr. Randeep Guleria, renowned pulmonologist, director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and the man who has been in action ever since the pandemic began in India. Right from the Empowered Group to the Vaccine Task Force, Dr. Guleria has been there in the planning and implementation system of India. Currently, we have also Dr. Gagandeep Kang, world-renowned vaccine researcher and virologist. Dr. Kang, in fact, is the first working woman in India to be inducted as Fellow of the Royal Society in London. We also have Dr. Chandrakant Laharia, eminent epidemiologist and public health expert. Three of our guests have authored a book on COVID-19 that has been released, and the book is named Till We Win. To talk about this book and the battle of COVID in India, we have Dr. Guleria, Dr. Chandrakant Laharia, and Dr. Gagandeep Kang. Dr. Gagandeep Kang, starting with you. The vaccine is something which has been most talked about in past few days. But the confidence is something which is a very, very important aspect of it. How do you see this entire process of vaccine and confidence building in common public?
So if people lack confidence in vaccines, it's because we are not doing our jobs by communicating appropriately. When you think about how vaccines are made and how vaccines are used, it's very clear that these are an incredible tool for public health to prevent disease and potentially also to prevent transmission.
A vaccine has been given the emergency use authorization in United Kingdom. What are the prospects of India? Where do we stand right now?
So I think we are in a very good position because we have a large number of vaccines being tried in our own country, which gives a lot of reassurance that they are going to be safe in our own population. And the other important thing is that unlike the Pfizer vaccine, many of them have the capacity to be used in our country, even in remote areas, and the cold chain can be maintained. So I think India will actually in the long run be in a position to provide vaccines not only for its own citizens, but for a large part of the developing world.
Just to take that forward, sir, if you see the discourse in past few days, it has ranged between who will be getting the vaccine. Of course, the healthcare workers priority group is being said. You have been there in constant. You were there in the empowered committee. Now you're in the vaccine task force. How do you view this? Because there are demands that everybody should be given the vaccine. Now there are also counter views that not everybody needs it. How do you see this?
I think whenever you are looking at vaccine, you should look at what is your aim to vaccinate individuals. We have two broad aims. One aim is to bring down our mortality. So the death rates has to be low. So all those individuals who have a higher risk of dying because of COVID-19, whether it be the elderly population, people with comorbidities, they would obviously be a priority list because we want to decrease our mortality. The second important thing is that we want to decrease the number of cases and decrease the chain of transmission. And therefore, those who are at a higher risk of getting the infection, especially healthcare workers, the frontline workers who are working and coming in close contact with COVID positive patients, become another priority list. As far as vaccinating the whole population is concerned, once we reach a threshold where we can say that we have now sufficiently decreased the chance of transmission and broken the chain of transmission, the cases will dramatically come down, and then it will not be that important that everyone should be vaccinated. Definitely the high risk group should continue to be vaccinated because of the higher mortality.
We have seen how people who are these leaders, they have come out in open, they have got themselves vaccinated. Now today that case has come where one of the Haryana's minister has tested positive. Now to build the confidence, it's okay. But when they test positive, how does it impact? And how the communication has to be well so that the wrong message doesn't go down?
There will always be incidences where you will have some people who will develop the infection despite the vaccine. It's never going to be 100%. And in the case that you mentioned, the 2 doses as of now have not even been given. So we can't really say that this is a failure of the vaccine. And we must also remember that in a trial, you will have some people who will be vaccinated and some who will get the placebo. So it's important even to understand what would the person get in terms of the injection. And based on that, only one can make a decision. But I think that person has still not got the second dose. So there is still not enough immunity generated as far as the vaccination is concerned. But it's very, very important that we simultaneously work on building public confidence on the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, because that is very important once we roll out the vaccine.
Coming to Dr. Laheria, what actually prompted you to write this book? How did you approach the other two authors here? What was actually the rationale behind writing this book?
COVID-19 was declared as pandemic on 11th March 2020, but we did not decide to write the book immediately after that. However, a few weeks into the pandemic, we realized that there is a lot of misinformation going on. The social media and other platforms were passing on information which was not always helpful, and it was resulting in panic and at times stigma and discrimination. So all three of us have interest in science communication, and when we sat together, we discussed that we need to pass on some of the valid and reliable and authentic information to the people. At the same time, as we are hearing in this entire conversation that in a pandemic response and in general in health response, science communication is an integral part of this approach and strategy. So we decided to write this book to empower people with the information which they need. And since we started writing this around 3 months into the pandemic, and it was clear by then that this pandemic is not going to be over soon, it will last longer. So we made a decision to write the book. That was one immediate purpose, but we had many other purposes.
On that note, a question to you, ma'am, on the vaccine research. If we see the vaccine research aspect, why do we need more number of vaccines? And along with that, if I can club in one question which has been very much into the public discourse of the adverse effect. We have seen this in Bharat Biotech. We have seen this in the Serum Institute. Why is it important to highlight the adverse effect? And what actually goes wrong if not everything comes public?
So if we look at why many vaccines are needed, you need vaccines for different reasons, and vaccines can have different approaches to delivery. So Dr. Guleria pointed out that some vaccines work really well to prevent mortality. Other vaccines might be used for the purpose of decreasing transmission. Now, usually when I can give you an example of where that happens. So for example, if we have polio vaccine, we have two kinds of polio vaccines. We have the inactivated polio vaccine, which is very good at protecting individuals against disease. But we also have the oral polio vaccine, which is very useful for decreasing transmission of polio. So when we think about this particular virus, we are looking at which are the potential best vaccines to have. Normally, when you start out with a vaccination program, a vaccine has a 1 in 15 chance of success. You try to make sure that your chances of success are as high as possible. But generally, if you start with a vaccine candidate, less than 10% of them succeed. So we started with over 300 candidates. We have 50 vaccines that are in clinical trials. Are all of them going to result in successful vaccines? I don't think so. I think we will now begin to see vaccine programs that will not work out for one reason or the other. Then we have to also think about vaccines that are suitable for delivery. So -70, -20, 2 to 8 degrees storage, which vaccine is stable for how long? So that's a reason for having multiple candidates. If we are very successful with 5, 6, 10 vaccines, we'll be in a very good position to vaccinate the whole world. Coming to adverse effects and when things go wrong, I think it's very important to understand that things go wrong all the time. People fall ill all the time. If I take 1 lakh people and I follow them up for 1 month, there will be a pneumonia hospitalization, there will be a heart attack, there will be a stroke. If they have all received vaccine, it's possible that if you have a stroke the day after you receive the vaccine, you'll say the stroke and the vaccine are related. But if you were to follow up 100,000 people for 1 month without vaccination, that would have happened. So what you need is the baseline rates of certain kinds of illnesses. And if those illnesses are much more than the baseline, then you can think about them being associated with the vaccine. It's important to be able to communicate this, because if people think that every illness that I have for 1 month or 2 months after I receive the vaccine is because of the vaccine, then they are going to falsely ascribe causality to that vaccination. And that is usually not the case. When you have rare adverse events, you're going to need to make sure that you can make that causality determination. Okay?
Dr. Guleria, in the book, you have talked about the end. There is a question where end of the pandemic is also discussed. You have been through the journey in the India's battle of pandemic. You have been there since early January. You have been there. Sir, where do you see this? Is the vaccine the final answer? If the vaccine comes and we start administering it to the priority groups, are we going to see the end of pandemic?
I don't think we can say that one solution is going to be the final solution, and therefore vaccine alone is not going to be enough. We will still have to continue to have COVID appropriate behavior. We will continue to see that we are able to prevent the chain of transmission. If we do that in combination, we will gradually see a decline in cases, and we may have a situation where the pandemic may be over, but there may be still off and on cases happening of COVID-19. So I would say that we will probably see two phases. One is a significant decline in the number of cases so that we are back to a near normal situation, which I hope will happen somewhere in the middle of next year or a little after that. And then we will also see a situation where we have vaccinated a large number of people globally, that now we have very few cases. It's not that we have eliminated COVID-19, but now it's something like what happens for other infections, that there are small spurts of cases off and on. But at a global level, we will be seeing very few cases. That may happen by, let's hope by the end of next year, but it will definitely probably happen by the year after that. That is when we will be able to say that the pandemic is, let's say, truly over. So I think what we are looking at currently is to vaccinate enough people so that we are able to save lives and have a significant decline in the number of cases in the coming months, and then gradually work on a strategy there where we say that this decline has now come to a stage where we can say that it's no longer a pandemic, but it's something that is becoming cases off and on of COVID-19, but without causing significant degree of mortality as we're currently seeing, especially in the Western world.
Dr. Guleria, just to take that forward on the vaccine count, one question. We have seen the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine requiring deep refrigeration. In Indian context, what are your own assessments that you feel? Which vaccine are we banking upon? Like VK Paul has said this in press conferences that India is eyeing those 5 candidates. Where are we on that?
So whenever we look at a vaccine, we are looking at a few things that are very, very important. The first thing is that the vaccine has to be safe. I think safety is of paramount importance. So we have to have robust and good data monitored by independent bodies to say that this vaccine is safe. Then we want to look at the efficacy, that this vaccine does work. It's worth giving it in terms of, as we discussed, decreasing the mortality and also breaking the chain of transmission so that we have lesser number of cases. Once we are able to do that, then we come to the most important thing, that if we have a vaccine, how practical is it to roll it out in the country or in some part of the world, considering the logistics that is there. And that is where some vaccines will not be very useful in countries like India, because you have to have a cold chain of -70 degrees centigrade. to maintain a cold chain of minus 70 degrees centigrade, it will not be practical, especially when we're looking at small towns or rural India. If you have a vaccine which you can maintain at 2 to 8 degrees, which is currently what is being done for all the other vaccines which are part of the immunization program that we have for children, then it's very easy because you already have an infrastructure in place. You just have to upscale that so that now you can vaccinate adults. So therefore, vaccinations which are 2 to 8, vaccines which can be kept at 2 to 8 are ideal, which can be kept at minus 20 is still manageable, but minus 70 is something which will be very difficult for most parts of the world. And the final issue would, of course, be the cost of the vaccine. If you have a vaccine where the cost is very high, then obviously it will not be something that can be looked at by many countries. And if you look at the last 2 points that I've mentioned, that is where the vaccines which are being manufactured in India tend to score over the Pfizer vaccine in terms of the temperature, in terms of cost. And therefore, in my mind, these are the vaccines which in our country will have the maximum use and maximum benefit, keeping the practical things in mind.
Taking that to Dr. Laheria. Dr. Laheria, you have, in the book, you have talked about the infrastructure, or medical infrastructure. Can you tell us about the infrastructure that we have for the vaccine delivery? How ready, how efficiently manageable is this situation right now?
So as far as vaccine storage is concerned, we heard from Dr. Guleria that there are 2 types of storage capacity. One is a minus 20 degree, which is deep freezer storage, and then there is a 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, which is ice-lined refrigerator. Most of the vaccines used in government universal immunization program are stored at the 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, but there are long-term storage for oral polio vaccines and rotavirus vaccine and other vaccines which are at the minus 20 degrees Celsius. So we have a system where the temperatures are being monitored. However, as we know that the COVID-19 vaccination would be required at the large scale, and if we are thinking in terms of millions of people being vaccinated, and every individual being given 2 doses, we definitely need some additional cold chain storage capacity. So what is required that we identify the right type of vaccine? What is also required that we need to know the pipeline of the vaccines, that how the vaccine, on which duration and what will be the availability plans, because this will not be available in one go. It will be available over a period of time, those doses. So good planning along with the identifying that which type of cold chain storage will be required and the vaccine supply chain need to be understood. And of course, since it's an additional number of doses, which will be in millions of doses, additional cold chain capacity will be required. So 2 points. One, we need to optimize the available cold chain space. We need to create additional cold chain space and a good planning. And that is how it will be done. And finally, closing this, though there is no experience from India on adult vaccination of such a large scale, however, India has been doing mass scale campaigns for oral polio vaccine. The only difference is that that was an oral vaccine. This is an injectable one. But India has also done large scale campaigns for measles in 2010 to 2012, where 240 million children were vaccinated. Then measles and rubella campaign. So country has experience in those areas. Of course, there is no substitute for good planning.
Dr. Guleria, to you, a question which has been there in everyone's mind. Sir, we have seen the metros, the best of the medical infrastructure as compared to the rural part having there. But sir, if we see the case scenario and the case fluctuation that has been seen in the metros, be it Delhi or Mumbai, why is it that metros have behaved differently? And why is it that the infrastructure that is there has in fact not been able to cope up with the existing infrastructure?
So if you look at metros, and they have behaved differently because of multiple factors. One factor is the population density. If you look at the number of people in a metro per square kilometer, it's much higher than what you would see in many rural areas. And you will have number of people who are sharing the same room or have a common toilet. And since this is a respiratory virus, where it spreads from person to person through droplet infection or through fomites, this is something which this crowded area promotes the spread of the infection. And that is why we saw a huge surge of cases initially, even in Mumbai and Delhi, especially in what we call the urban slums, where there is such a lot of crowding. In the rural areas, the people are more scattered. There's not that much of crowding. However, the health infrastructure there is a challenge as compared to the metros. So we are looking at a sort of a different situation, and different planning needs to be done in different parts of the country. In metros, we have to be very aggressive in developing containment zones, making sure that the spread of the infection doesn't happen. COVID appropriate behavior is good. And in areas where people cannot isolate themselves at home, COVID care centers were developed, because if you are 5 people staying in one room, there is no way that you can isolate them in the at the home, and that's why that COVID care facilities were required and were built in Mumbai and Delhi and in various other cities. So the strategy has to be different in different areas, considering population density, the available health infrastructure, and human behavior. That I think is also very, very important, because if you look at what has happened now as compared to when the lockdown was started or in the early months, we were very, very diligent as far as COVID appropriate behavior was concerned. People would maintain physical distancing when they went out, and masks were regularly worn. That has gradually declined as far as the last few months have been concerned. And now we've seen various states where rallies, elections, and other things have been held. We've had the festive season also. And we've seen a huge decline in COVID appropriate behavior, whether it's physical distancing or wearing masks. So that also has caused a change in the way the pandemic has behaved in various areas, including Delhi, Mumbai, and larger cities, and also in rural India.
Sir, one last question to you before I let you go. If we see the current context, since the vaccine is in sight and the Prime Minister has also spoken about it, do you see, and what would you suggest people to do? Because there would be a mad rush that is expected once the vaccine comes. What is that has to be kept in mind? And when can a common man can expect a dose of vaccine without any rush?
So I think in the first few months, there has to be vaccine which has to be given, like has already been mentioned, in a very structured manner. A lot of planning needs to be done. It's almost in a way that you have to be able to have not only the cold chain being maintained, but enough syringe, needle, enough vaccinators being there, distributed all over the country, and developing how you could say in each area, in each district, have a facility available where the injections can be given. And remember, we have to give 2 doses. So it's almost like an exercise that one would do for an election. And when you do that, you will also have to have a line listing of those who need to be given priority and to be given the injection. Once that is done, and we have sufficient doses available, then you could say that anyone could go off the shelf and buy the vaccine and take it for himself. But first, we have to work on decreasing the mortality and decreasing the number of cases. That will take many months because of our population size, and it will also depend on the number of doses of vaccine available and the number of vaccine candidates which are approved and which we find are effective. So the coming few months will help decide on this strategy. But the first focus has to be on decreasing the mortality and decreasing the number of cases. And then once we have sufficient doses available, then it will be available to more and more people. And I hope that we will quickly have a situation where we can give vaccine to anyone who comes forward and wants to get himself vaccinated.
With that, it's a wrap. Thank you, Dr. Guleria, Dr. Leheria, and Dr. Kang for your precious time. Appreciate you being joining us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.